Welcome to my channel. World Scene News. Subscribe to my channel for news updates all around the world. Few international relationships are as critical, or as tense, as that between the United States and China. In late 2025, a much-anticipated trade deal, months in the making, began to unravel, threatening global supply chains and the livelihoods of millions. At the center was U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, tasked with navigating high-stakes diplomacy with Beijing. This story is about the ambitions, pressures, and missteps that nearly collapsed the deal, and why it matters to every American. Let's dive into the dramatic events, the key players, and the far-reaching consequences of the U.S.-China trade standoff. To truly grasp the dynamics of the 2025 trade negotiations, it's essential to understand the man at the center of it all, Scott Bessent, the U.S. Treasury Secretary. Bessent isn't just another government official, he's a figure whose background and approach have shaped the very nature of these high-stakes talks. Before stepping into public service, Bessent made his name as a hedge fund manager, navigating the volatile world of global finance. This experience gave him a unique, market-driven perspective. And he approached the U.S.-China negotiations not as a traditional diplomat, but as someone used to making billion-dollar decisions under pressure. For Bessent, every round of talks was like a high-stakes financial transaction, where risk and reward had to be carefully weighed. His primary objective was clear: secure concrete, measurable wins for the United States. Bessent zeroed in on two critical sectors: agriculture and technology, knowing that progress here would have a direct impact on American jobs and the broader economy. He pushed for enforceable commitments, determined to bring back results that would resonate from rural farms to Silicon Valley. Yet, Bessent's path was anything but straightforward. He found himself caught between powerful trade hawks in Washington, who demanded a tough stance against China, and influential business leaders who were desperate for stability and predictability in the global market. Navigating these competing interests required not just financial savvy, but political finesse. The stakes were personal too. To avoid any appearance of conflict of interest, Bessent made the difficult decision to sell his own stake in a soybean farm, a move that underscored just how intertwined his own life was with the issues on the table. It was a reminder that these negotiations weren't just about numbers. They were about real people, livelihoods, and the future of American industry. As the talks unfolded, Bessent became the public face of the negotiations. Every statement he made, every gesture was scrutinized by the media, politicians, and the public alike. The pressure was relentless, with cameras following his every move and analysts dissecting his strategies in real time. His challenge was immense: deliver a deal that could satisfy the administration's hardliners, reassure anxious business leaders, and address the economic needs of millions of Americans. The stakes were nothing less than the future direction of U.S. trade policy and its impact on the global stage. As negotiations intensified, so did the scrutiny and the stakes. For Scott Bessent, the pressure would only grow, and every decision he made would help shape the outcome of one of the most consequential trade deals in recent history. The trade talks hinged on two critical commodities: American soybeans and Chinese rare earth minerals. For U.S. farmers, China's market was a lifeline, so the administration demanded massive guaranteed soybean purchases. For China, rare earth minerals were the ultimate bargaining chip, essential for U.S. tech and defense industries. The October 2025 framework promised big soybean buys from China and a pause on rare earth export controls. This soybeans for minerals swap was the fragile foundation of the deal. Both sides saw these commodities as political necessities, not just economic ones. The stakes: rural livelihoods in America and technological dominance for China. But as we'll see, this delicate balance was hard to maintain. The October agreement was a patchwork of tough demands from both sides, reflecting years of growing mistrust and economic rivalry. Each side came to the table with a long list of grievances and ambitions, determined to protect their own interests while pushing the other to make significant concessions. The negotiations were tense, with both American and Chinese officials aware that the outcome could reshape the global economic landscape for years to come. The US wanted not just restored, but increased agricultural sales, hoping to open up new markets for American farmers who had been hit hard by the trade war. Washington also demanded an end to forced technology transfers, a practice where American companies operating in China were pressured to share their intellectual property. In addition, the US pushed for greater access for American companies in China's vast consumer market, seeking to level the playing field for US businesses and ensure fair competition. Tariffs were the US's main leverage, with threats to reimpose them if China didn't comply. These tariffs had already caused significant disruption to global supply chains, and the US made it clear that they would not hesitate to use them again as a bargaining chip. The message was simple: comply with American demands, or face renewed economic pressure. For China, the top priority was to end the punishing tariffs that had slowed its economic growth and threatened jobs. Chinese leaders were especially concerned about protecting their strategic industries, such as rare earth minerals and high-tech manufacturing, which are vital to the country's long-term ambitions. These sectors represent the future of China's economy, and Beijing was determined to shield them from foreign interference. Beijing also wanted respect for its economic model and to avoid US interference in its tech ambitions. Chinese officials insisted that their approach to economic development had lifted millions out of poverty and deserved recognition, not criticism. They were wary of any deal that might limit their ability to innovate or control the direction of their own technology sector. The rare earths concession was a calculated move, offered only if the US eased up on tariffs and tech restrictions. China knew its dominance in rare earth minerals gave it a powerful bargaining chip, as these materials are essential for everything from smartphones to military hardware. By putting rare earths on the table, Beijing signaled both its willingness to negotiate and its determination to protect its most valuable assets. Both sides saw the deal as a way to secure their own future, but neither was willing to give ground easily. The negotiators faced intense pressure from their governments and industries back home, knowing that any sign of weakness could be politically costly. Every word and gesture at the table was carefully calculated, as each side tried to gain the upper hand without derailing the talks. The result, after weeks of back and forth, was a fragile truce, with each side watching for the other to blink. The agreement offered a temporary pause in hostilities, but beneath the surface, tensions remained high. Both countries knew that the real test would come in the months ahead, as they tried to turn promises into action and prove that compromise was possible in an era of fierce competition. Optimism faded quickly as the deal's details bogged down in mistrust and slow implementation. China's soybean purchases stalled, falling far short of promises, fueling anxiety among US farmers and officials. At the same time, China hesitated on rare earth guarantees, raising alarms in Washington's defense sector. Each side used delays as leverage. China slowed soybean buys, the US threatened renewed tariffs. The talks became a high-stakes game of chicken, with both sides waiting for the other to blink. Instead of cooperation, suspicion grew, and the deal teetered on collapse. What was meant to be a breakthrough became a tense standoff. The world watched as the agreement unraveled, threatening global stability. The breaking point came in early December 2025. Under pressure, Scott Bessent announced the US would not force China to speed up soybean purchases, a clear concession. This was the US blinking first, prioritizing the survival of the deal over a hardline stance. Critics called it a retreat, but forcing China's hand risked total collapse and disaster for American farmers. Bessent's move was pragmatic. Better a slow deal than no deal at all. Meanwhile, uncertainty over rare earths and a surprise approval for Nvidia to sell AI chips to China signaled more US concessions. The administration was making trade-offs to keep the fragile agreement alive. Bessent's announcement was the most public sign that the US had reached its limits. The fallout hit America's Farm Belt hardest. Soybean prices had briefly surged, but as China's purchases slowed, hope turned to anxiety. Farmers faced renewed uncertainty, unable to plan, invest, or even cover costs. The pain rippled outward. Equipment makers like John Deere saw slumping sales, and rural economies suffered. The administration's $12 billion farm aid package was a stopgap, not a solution. Losses for major crops in 2025 were estimated at up to $44 billion. Aid barely scratched the surface. For many, the real problem was the loss of a reliable export market, not just short-term financial pain. The trade war's impact was personal, immediate, and deeply felt across rural America. In the face of mounting economic pressure and political backlash, the government scrambled to manage the fallout, offering emergency farm aid, tweaking tariffs, and trying to keep the economy afloat. Officials rushed to reassure anxious farmers, who were hit hard by retaliatory tariffs and falling exports. Billions in subsidies were rolled out, but many wondered if it was enough to offset the damage. At the same time, behind closed doors, policymakers made surprise tech concessions, allowing certain companies to continue business with Chinese firms, despite ongoing security concerns. The tech sector, caught in the crossfire, lobbied hard for exceptions, arguing that cutting off China would hurt American innovation and profits. Tariffs, once seen as a powerful tool for leverage and government revenue, began to backfire. Import tax income fell sharply as trade slowed, and consumers faced higher prices on everyday goods. Supermarkets saw empty shelves and families felt the pinch at the checkout line. Businesses struggled to absorb rising costs, passing them on to shoppers. In response, the administration quietly removed tariffs on some goods, hoping to ease public anger and stabilize the markets. Officials avoided the spotlight, wary of appearing weak, but the move signaled a shift in strategy. Meanwhile, a controversial deal allowed Nvidia to sell advanced AI chips to China, prioritizing revenue and business interests over national security concerns. The decision sparked heated debate, with some calling it a necessary compromise and others warning of long-term risks. Critics questioned the logic. Was the U.S. truly protecting its interests, or just patching holes in a leaky policy? Political analysts and citizens alike debated the administration's mixed signals, fueling uncertainty and frustration. The administration was juggling relief for struggling farmers, the economic blowback from tariffs, and the challenge of keeping key industries competitive. All the while, they needed to keep China at the negotiating table, balancing confrontation with cooperation in a high-stakes global standoff. The result was a confusing mix of toughness and retreat, with no easy answers and no clear end in sight. Every move seemed to spark new questions and new controversies. The contradictions of the trade war were on full display, leaving Americans to wonder what the next twist would bring. The US-China trade saga is more than a story of soybeans and tariffs. It's a lesson in global power and economic reality. Even the world's largest economy can't dictate terms to a rival as big and integrated as China. The future will be defined by tough, ongoing negotiations, not dominance. The deal's fate remains uncertain, with more tense talks ahead over agriculture, minerals, and technology. These decisions affect everyone: prices at the store, job security, and national security. The trade war shows that foreign policy is domestic policy. What happens in Beijing and Washington hits home. The need for pragmatic, clear-eyed leadership has never been greater. How America navigates its relationship with China will shape the future for all of us.